I've been avoiding to make this video for a very long time because EQ is extremely dependent on the source. No two instruments sound the same, right? Not all guitars sound the same, not all drum sets sound the same, not all pianos sound the same. So there's no point in me telling you, oh, you should boost 5.6 kilohertz or you should cut at 374 hertz. It doesn't matter because different instruments require different EQ. So in this video, I'm going to try to explain the general concept of EQing and tell you how I think about it. For any instrument, it doesn't matter what it is that I'm EQing, if it's an instrument or a vocal microphone or whatever I'm doing. Because if you understand the concept, even if you forgot the important frequencies, you can still figure it out pretty quickly on your own. I'm going to go ahead and load a scene that I already mixed, just so that you can see what I'm doing. And I'm going to give you that scene, and you can also download the multitracks and load it on your setup and play around with it and figure out and practice. That's my point. I'm going to select the first channel, which is the kick drum, and go to the EQ. I'm going to reset my EQ. And I'm going to turn off the low cut. Okay. Step number 1 is to find the fundamental frequency of that sound. The fundamental frequency is the lowest frequency that needs to exist in order to hear the sound properly. Okay? So that's the main frequency. If you play a sine wave, that should be the frequency. Everything above it is overtones, and these are important, but everything below it is undertones. These are just noise. They don't need to exist. Okay, so for a kick drum, the fundamental frequency is usually somewhere around 60 hertz, maybe 50 hertz, 50 to 60 hertz, that's the fundamental. If you have a huge kick drum, very big kick drum, sometimes it's 45 hertz, but I doubt you'll have that in a live environment. So 50 to 60 hertz, you can boost that a little bit, and that's the fundamental for a kick drum. And everything below it is what? Undertones. Undertones are what? Noise. They don't need to exist. So I'm going to cut everything below the fundamental. Cool? Some people don't like to cut, to do a low cut for some reason, and it works for them. For me, I always like to cut anything that should not exist. These other people, what they do is they usually do something like a low shelf, where they do this. So they kind of do this, attenuate it a little bit. I don't like that. Okay, so I'm gonna go back to that and boost the fundamental a little bit. Cool. Now we found the lowest frequency. We cut everything below the lowest frequency that needs to exist. Step number 3 is to find the annoying frequencies that are just too much. There's just too much of it. And the point here is not to remove them entirely, it's just to attenuate it, bring it down enough so it's not annoying anymore. Well, on a kick drum, a very common annoying frequency would be 400 hertz. Between 400 and 500 hertz, that's where the boxy sounds come from. It sounds like it's muffled, like there's too much wood. That's what it sounds like to me. So usually we would cut a little bit of 400 to 500 hertz, and also maybe double that, the octave of that, because frequencies. So if that's the fundamental, right, at 60 hertz, the octave above it would be double the frequency, right? So it would be 120 hertz. So if 400 hertz is problematic, then 800 hertz is also gonna probably be problematic. So you might have to cut that a little bit and just cut it enough to where it's not annoying anymore, right? Don't go all the way and notch it out completely. Just bring it down enough to where it's balanced again. Okay, cool. Now, we still need attack for that sound, right, to be able to hear it. Because right now, especially with bass instruments, you can just feel it, but you still need to hear the transient, the attack. So I'm going to go to a high band and boost a little bit off. Somewhere around 5 to 6 kilohertz. That's where the snap is. That's where the attack exists. And just do a high shelf. Cool? Or if you're having problems with feedback on stage with high frequencies, then you can just do a normal bell EQ, band pass EQ, like this, and boost the attack. Cool? So step number 1, find the fundamental frequency. Step number 2, cut everything below the fundamental. Step number 3, find all the annoying frequencies, bring them down. Step number 4, if possible, if you have more bands available, boost the pretty frequencies that make the sound more beautiful. So always remove what should not exist and attenuate what is annoying or painful to hear, right? So anything below the fundamentals should not exist. Anything that is in the mid-range that feels very muffled or boxy or pointy or it hurts your ears or is feeding back, remove that. And if possible, if you still have more bands available, boost the beautiful frequencies that make the sound prettier. Now, I just went with you through a kick drum example. I'll go right now through more channels to give you a general idea of where the main frequency ranges are. But you can download the scene and see for yourself and play around with it. The fundamental of the snare drum is usually around 200 hertz, and the annoying frequencies are kind of similar to those of the kick drum, and the attack is a bit lower, so maybe at like 4 kilohertz or even 3 kilohertz sometimes. I'll go through the toms. The high tom, sometimes it's like 140 hertz, the fundamental. A low tom is 100 hertz, maybe 80 hertz, depends on the size of the tom. Overheads, cut everything that is low frequencies from them, because you don't need any bass in the overheads, because it is not in time with the microphone of the kick drum. So if you have too much low frequencies in the overhead microphones, it will interfere with the kick drum. So I always like to cut low frequencies from the overheads. Not too much, not like this to the point where like there's nothing other than cymbals. You should still have the sound of the drums in the overhead, but not too much bass. Okay, bass guitar. Wow, that's pretty crazy because I have a DI and a amp. Okay, the bass usually 80 hertz is the fundamental. Nothing below 80 hertz should exist. Don't have 60 hertz in the bass guitar and 60 hertz in the kick drum, and now they clash together. It doesn't work. So between 80 and 100 hertz will be usually the fundamental frequency of the bass guitar. And the attack of it will be somewhere between 1 kilohertz and 2 kilohertz. And the woody sound, the sound of the wood that gives it a bit of presence, is usually around the 400 hertz mark. So what you cut from the kick drum is usually what you boost on the bass guitar. And a misconception is that you need to have, I'm cutting right here, you need to have, oh, too much bass, it's the bass guitar. No. Too much bass frequencies in the bass guitar are not helpful. They cover something else. They clash with the bass drum, right? So electric guitars are kind of tricky. You'll have to like sweep around and figure out what sounds good, because each amp is different, each amp setting is different, each guitar is different. So I'll usually boost the fundamental. In this case, it was 285, whatever, between 200 and 300 hertz. Got the annoying frequency. And right here, this at 2 kilohertz, this is where the attack of the guitar was. So I boosted that. Acoustic guitar, same stuff. Cut the low frequencies. You don't need a bunch of low frequencies in the acoustic guitar, because if there's too much of it, it will interfere with the bass, right? They will clash together. So don't make it too thin to the point where it's just fizzing the strings. It should have some body in it in the sound, but not too much of it, right? Boost some high frequencies, a high shelf. Basically same stuff. Vocals. Vocals are kind of tricky. Some people, as I told you before, don't like to cut the low frequencies at all. They just do a low shelf. I don't like that at all. So I'll cut anything that is lower than the fundamental. Usually a male vocal would have a fundamental at like 100 hertz, a female vocal at like 200 hertz. It depends on the person, but that's the rough range, and cut everything below it. A nasally frequency is usually at 1K. It sounds like this, like they are speaking from their nose. That is annoying. So between 800 and 1K. That is a very annoying frequency on vocals usually. And the presence of the vocals, what makes you understand what they're saying, is usually up above 6 kilohertz. A lot of people think that the presence of the vocal is at 3K or 4K, but that's actually a very sharp, annoying frequency in my own experience. I don't like to boost that at all. Sometimes I even cut a little bit of 2K because it's too much pointiness in the vocal. I hope this was a bit insightful and gave you a better idea about how to think about EQ. Now, usually when you want to find that annoying frequency, people tend to boost it and sweep around to find it. You can do that, but during the show, there's no way you would do that. So there's another way to actually listen to the frequency you're searching for without anybody else listening to it. So click on this video right here to learn how to do a band solo on the EQ to only listen to one band without anybody else listening to it and figure out what is the annoying frequency and catch it and address it. So click right here and I'll see you in the next video.